Well, welcome, Sound Advice, Hearing Friendly Business Podcast listeners. It's so great. We're almost through February and we're getting ready to start in March. And March the 3rd is International Hearing Day. For those of you who may not have known that, but that's what it is. So today we have a special guest, Dr. Neil Bauman. He is a hearing loss coping skills specialist. He's also a researcher. We're going to get to hear today about how his research has gone for toxic drugs or medications. I like to call them medications because drugs can just be just about anything. He's also obviously an author since he's written a book on this topic and many others. And he's a speaker on issues pertaining to hearing loss. Dr. Neil is no stranger to the problems associated with hearing loss, as he has successfully lived with a lifelong severe hereditary hearing loss issue himself. And just like most adults that are over 60, Dr. Neil also has had an increase in hearing loss, where his hearing loss has gotten worse, and mine has also, because I'm over 60 as well. Simply because that's what happens to people at a certain age in life. The bones sometimes have a tendency of just breaking down, and that's the way it is. And so I'm going to let Dr. Neil tell you about his book and how you can use it. And I will be asking questions because I am a former emergency room department manager, as well as I've written a book myself called Sound Advice. Tune into listening.
Thank you, Teresa. Just
right there.
It's called Ototoxic Drugs or Autotoxic Drugs. And the byline says, the shocking truth about prescription drugs, medications, chemicals, and herbals can and do damage our ears. You might be like me, or like I was. 25 years ago, it never crossed my mind that drugs could damage ears. I'd never thought of it. It never crossed my mind. And I was taking a course on how to teach other people speech reading and coping strategies at the time. And in the third year of the course, there was just a little section, and they mentioned that some drugs were thought or known to damage ears. And to me, that was just totally something new. And eventually I got intrigued. I'll tell you, it was very interesting how I got into it, because I was doing this course, how to teach people to deal with their hearing loss. And I found, because I lived in central Alberta at the time, and you get 40 below zero, you get blizzards, and I couldn't believe it, but the little old ladies wouldn't come out to our classes in those weather. And so I realized there's a lot of people that couldn't make it to our classes, and we were teaching them all over the province. So I decided I would write a book that would incorporate all that I've learned, including this little bit about drugs. And I called this book by the grandiose title of Everything You Wanted to Know About Your Hearing Loss, but were afraid to ask because you knew you wouldn't hear the answers anyway. And I had one chapter of 13 pages. I did some research, and I wrote this chapter of 13 pages about drugs that could damage ears. And then I set it aside and wrote other chapters and so on. And then I thought, well, I was coming back and just looking at it again. I thought, well, I wonder if maybe, just maybe, I missed a drug or two. And I like doing a good job. I didn't want to miss things. So I started researching it in earnest. And 5 years later, my 13-page chapter, which was never published, became this, was a 697-page book, the first edition. This is the third edition at 800 pages. And I'm currently working on the fourth edition, and I'm already up to over 1,300 pages. So I figure it'll be about 1,600 pages when I'm finished. And so that's how I got into it. It wasn't because drugs had damaged my ears or anything. I was just intrigued. And that's what we've got now.
So how do you use your book? And can you show us maybe what you showed me previously, how chapter 1 is and how the rest of the book is?
Well,
For those people who are doing visuals, but we will have this
yeah,
on YouTube later on.
right. Well, if you can see, this thin part here is about 165 pages, and that teaches you what autotoxic drugs are. It teaches you how to use the book, and there's various chapters, like one on the aminoglycosides, which are very bad drugs for your body. It also has, in this third edition, chapter 13 called Keep Yourself Healthy While Taking Few or No Drugs. In other words, the natural alternatives. How can you get off the drug treadmill? And as people get older, they seem to take more and more drugs. And so most people over 65, it seems like they're taking 10 or more drugs a day. And most of those can damage ears. The rest of the book, all of this, are the listings of the various drugs and how they damage your ears. So you can see whether they affect your cochlea, the hearing part of your ears, and cause hearing loss, tinnitus, hyperacusis, things like that. Whether they damage the balance part of your cochlea, so that you get your dizziness, ataxia, where you stagger around like the proverbial drunken sailor, vertigo, and then they have below that, whether if you have outer or middle ear conditions, and then just general ear conditions. So it's broken down, and you can see what I know about it. Now, how you would do.
Two real areas that I really want to plug into, and I know what other experts have said. I also know what the PDF says. So we have physician desk reference in the medical field, which I'm sure you have researched on. But what do you think about the mycin? So in particular, we are, obviously we're still in the pandemic, but this is also flu season. And we have, and I don't know in Canada, but in the United States, we have a medication called Zithromax or Z-Pak. So you just take 5 pills, and everybody likes it quick and sweet these days. So you take 5 pills of these antibiotics. So what is your take on Zithromax or any of the other mycins for that fact, being a ear damaging medication?
Okay, the simple answer is they all are. But what people forget is they think of the mycins and they're thinking of aminoglycosides, which are the worst antibiotics in terms of ototoxicity and were damaging to the ears. And so you've got neomycin, streptomycin, amikacin. It's one of the few that doesn't have a mycin ending, and so on. And they're saying these are the ones we're thinking about: gentamicin, tobramycin. But you brought up azithromycin is not an aminoglycoside, it's a macrolide antibiotic. And so there's some of those that end in mycin, but they're much less ototoxic than aminoglycosides. And then you've got the lincomycins, and they're in between, and various other drugs that just happen to end in mycin. So don't be lulled into thinking that because it ends in mycin, it has to be really bad, because some of them are much less. So
of course, we're not making any medical claims here. I'm protecting my RN license, so that's what I'm doing. And then we're also suggesting that you check with your healthcare provider if you have any questions about any of these medications. But I think it is phenomenal that the general public, and in particular, when you have a pediatrician that may be prescribing some sort of medication for a young child that may have a cold or may have swimmer's ear or may have flu symptoms, that they be even more cognitively aware of it. So brain aware, just aware of it. So as a mother of 2, I know it's something that anytime any doctor has said anything, I also have researched it and looked at it to decide on whether I think it's safe for them. They're now adult children, so I don't do that anymore. But it's the kind of thing that I think it is important for each of us to take our responsibility for our body. And the other area that I'm super curious about is, do you have in your book, is it, because I haven't read your book or ordered your book, but in your book, does it have where you can say, we'll pick on the mysins. So if you have the mysins, do you have some sort of herbal equivalent to that? Or what do you think would work instead of, say, in the case of the flu? So instead of somebody taking antibiotics, then, because I know my own daughter, her father is a cardiologist, and he self-treated our family. And in particular, he gave her so many antibiotics when she was growing up that she now doesn't take any antibiotics. I mean, and of course, if you're in the emergency room and it's a matter of life and death, then you take whatever you need to do to save your life. And then you'll learn to deal with hearing loss like Dr. Neal and I have, so that's the bottom line. But I know she does a lot of herbal solutions. I won't say cures because I'm not allowed to say that, but solutions. So what would be equivalent for, say, something, instead of going to the physician, which is going to cost you money anyway, versus some sort of herbal solution that might help with, we'll just say, flu? Do you have something in your book with that?
I don't specifically deal with, say, if you have this, this works.
Okay.
Because I'm not a medical doctor.
Okay.
And so I'm not practicing medicine. I am giving information, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can ignore it, you can poo-poo it, or you can follow it. And so what I tell people to do, I mean, I'm a great believer in alternative medicine and in taking as few drugs as possible. And so I try not to take anything. I'm on one drug at 75. That's it. Most people at 75 are taking, what did they say? Around 50% of Americans over 75 are taking something like 20 drugs a day. And so I have a chapter in this book that tells you the 10 worst foods that cause illness. Your body's just not working well. And I have another list of the 10 best foods that will help you. And I tell people, look on the bad list and find one class of foods, like maybe it's pastries or ice cream or whatever, and find the one that you think you could eliminate the easiest. And just determine you're not going to do that one again, or hardly ever. And then look on the other side, on the good foods, and add one of those in. And after you've got squared away with that one, then you can go to take another one and another one, and slowly you'll improve your health. And so, like when you ask about flu, I've got lots of flu remedies, that I try myself. But if you go to a doctor, you're not going to hear those. So I would suggest to people, go to a naturopath. That's an MD, not an MD. If you're talking about health, if you want health, if you break an arm, you go to the doctor that knows how to set arms and put a cast on. But if you're dealing with health, I'd go to a herbalist, a naturopath, chiropractors learn a lot about it. And that's where I go first. But I use a lot of remedies. And if you can see behind me on the shelf, those are just books on health and how to stay healthy. And so I try and follow that kind of thing, because too often, as Americans, we have a saying, a drug for every bug and a pill for every ill. And that's not the thing. I tell people that medications should be your last line of defense, not your first line of attack. So I go through all the things, and I do whatever I can using supplements and herbals and whatever to stay healthy. And if something happens that I can't, like I have a little scar on my finger right there, and that happened, 45 years ago or so, but I cut myself there on the edge of my rototiller and it got infected. So I did the normal things that I would do for infections to try and get it out and so on. And it must have been a bad guy. And it started swelling up and my hand swelled up. I had big sausages for fingers and it started working up my arm. And I made a decision. If it gets to my elbow and my solutions don't work, I'm going to the doctor and taking an antibiotic. And that's exactly what had to happen. And so I took an antibiotic for the first time in 20 some odd years.
Wow.
Because I needed that and that killed it. And it's just like yesterday I had to go to the doctor and get an antibiotic because I had an infection I couldn't kill. I tried, didn't work. So I go, but here I'm only on the second day. Well, I've only taken 2 pills now, and I already noticed my body has reacted very strongly in favor. I'm just about cured, and they give you a 7-day supply. And that is one of the things that I would like to caution people on. It used to be the doctors always said, you know, you've got to take 7 days or 10 days or 14 days, whatever it is. Because if you don't, then any of the bad guys that are still in your body will become drug resistant and cause more problems. Well, I read last year an article that debunked that and said that's not true, that you actually build up more drug resistance the longer you take the drugs. And so my personal philosophy is that you take drugs for as long as you need them, and then I give 1 more day grace, and then I will stop. And I will bet that I will stop at 3.5 days of this 7-day prescription, just because I know my body and I know it works. And so I try and avoid having any more damage to my ears because I hear very little as it is. And so the way to do it, I have 3 rules for drugs. You take the least autotoxic drug available, or actually, if you want to call it, I would start out with, as I say, the herbals and everything else, whatever can work. And if you can't do that, if you got to go to prescription drugs, least autotoxic drug available, you take the lowest dose that will do the job, and you take it for the shortest possible time. And if you do that, you fly under the autotoxic radar. I like to say that everybody has what I call a magic threshold. And if you are below the magic threshold, you can take the drug and have no side effects. And as soon as you just jump above it, instantly you've got those side effects coming. And so I call it magic because you don't know where it is. And yours, for example, Teresa, and mine could be totally different. Right. And so if you take a drug and you've got no problems, go for it. And then the doctor says, oh, let's say it's the antidepressant. Well, you need to double the dose. And right away, first pill, second pill, you've got screaming tinnitus, you've got hearing loss, you've got other side effects.
So antidepressants actually might be a cause of hearing loss, or?
Oh, yeah. Hearing loss and tinnitus especially.
Yeah.
I hear from so many people. And so I tell them, can you get back to the lower dose? Some people send me a list of what they've taken, and I just saw one. I've got to answer him. And he had started taking 25 milligrams, then he went up to 50 milligrams, and then 75. 25 milligrams he'd been on for a long time, no problems. 50 milligrams, he started getting tinnitus and hearing loss. 75, he got worse. And I said, obviously, your magic threshold is between 25 and 50. Right. So if you stayed down at 25, you could get the therapeutic value of the drug without wrecking your ears. So I tell people to do things like that.
And how about aspirin? What have you heard about that?
Aspirin is an interesting drug because it causes tinnitus, it causes hearing loss. But the good news about aspirin, supposedly about 95% of the time, when you quit taking it, your hearing comes back and your tinnitus goes away.
Hmm.
But
And you've talked to people that that's happened to?
yeah, well, I got stories about
Oh,
them.
stories. Okay. Okay.
You know,
Well, could you share one of those stories?
I don't think it's in this one.
Okay.
I just could go from memory.
Okay. Okay.
But what happens is it's so hard to know because people vary so much in their body chemistry. Some people are very sensitive to aspirin, and they can't take any dose. Even a children's aspirin is far, far too much. Other people, normally, conventional wisdom says you could take 5 or 6 adult aspirin a day without having tinnitus. So take it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And if you have to take it, you do that. And yeah, people, I've got various stories in the book of various drugs and how they quit taking it, the hearing loss, the hearing comes back, and the tinnitus goes away. Other people, they can take like ibuprofen. Everybody seems to take ibuprofen. It seems to be the darling drug of the doctors. But some people, the very first pill they take, and in fact, a medical doctor is in one of my stories because he told me this, very first pill he took gave him permanent tinnitus. Other people can take ibuprofen for 20 years without getting tinnitus. And so drugs vary. And like if you think of the benzodiazepine class of drugs, you might not get tinnitus while you're taking the drug. But when it comes time to get off the drug, all of a sudden you get screaming tinnitus. And so you have to taper off benzodiazepines very, very slowly. And most doctors tell you, you cut it in half for 2 weeks and cut it in quarters for 2 weeks and you're off. You want to be safe that you don't get all these side effects. You want to cut it by 1/3 of 1% per day. So that would be 300 days. So I tell people, drop it by 1% for 3 days, then drop it by another 1% for 3 more days, and so on. Or do a 10% reducing taper. So the first month you'd reduce it by 10% of whatever it was. Let's say it was 10 milligrams, so you're down to 9. But then the next month you don't take 9, you take 10% of what's left. So that'd be 10% of 9, and so on. And that is a parabolic taper, and it slows way down. And something that's rather interesting, as you get down very low, you say, well, it's safe to quit now. But sometimes your body, percentage-wise, the number of receptors that are there is increasing, and you have to really go slow. And so I tell people, think in terms of roughly a year for tapering off any of these psychotropic drugs, and you'll probably be okay. Because I've seen so many people that got off benzos too fast, and even going back on the benzo doesn't get rid of the tinnitus.
How about the opioids? Or like Oxycontin?
Any pure opioid they're ototoxic to a certain degree. But one of the nasty things is, let's just take Vicodin as an example, where you've got hydrocodone and acetaminophen, or Tylenol. Tylenol itself is very, very ototoxic. When they put a petri dish and put some Tylenol in, I think it's within 15 minutes, every last cell is dead. The hair cells, it just does. And what happens if you're taking an opioid at the same time, like Vicodin protects, the opioid protects your ears against the acetaminophen, so that you don't die or your ears don't die. But if you take too much acetaminophen, of course, it kills your kidneys, and then you die, and then your ears don't work very well after that either.
No. Well, since we're on this topic of these, I know I have read somewhere that the one of choice is Advil in reference to keeping temperatures down with COVID. But what have you heard about Advil? Anything or?
Advil switch. What's the generic name?
I don't honestly know, to be quite honest with you. So there we are. So
My mind, I just
you're
don't
gonna
want to, I
look it
don't
up.
want to, yeah, that's what we do because I don't want to tell you something wrong. AD. Come on, where are you? Oh, Advil's ibuprofen, right. I was going to say naproxen, but that's fine.
You want to be real sure.
Yeah, well, of ibuprofen, of all the drugs that there is, I have received personally more reports of people having tinnitus from taking ibuprofen than pretty well any other drug. There's 3 or 4 that are right up there, and that is one of them. So unless you know what your tolerance is for it, I don't even recommend it. Because I say I call it one of those drugs that sits on the fence and it can fall off either way. You can have permanent tinnitus or temporary. And if you know you're going to get temporary and you say, well, I'll put up for the week or something while I take this drug for whatever ailment you have, that's fine. But if you're like that doctor that took 1 pill and that was it, that's not a good.
No.
But now the other thing that I found that was really hard, and you see, I'm playing the odds. I'm taking the theoretical average person, but nobody's average. So you have to figure out where you fit in this. What happens? I said to a person, or he told me he had taken this drug and he got screaming tinnitus. So he quit taking it and the tinnitus went away. So he was happy. So I'm saying, well, what you've done in the past is probably what will happen in the future. So sometime later, he needed the drug again. So he took it. He got his tinnitus back. But he knew, get off the drug, and it's gone. Imagine his horror when he found out it was now permanent. So Advil sometimes goes this way, sometimes this way, and sometimes it seems to fall this way first. And the next time you try it, whoops, now it's permanent. And there's no way of knowing ahead of time which you're going to be. So I caution people, go easy on the drugs.
Right. So it's always better to take the natural holistic route when you, well, it's always better, except if it's a life-threatening situation. So what have you found that's really worked well, or what sort of herbs do you think really work well with any sort of hearing loss, or any stories on that?
Well, one of the things is not a herbal so much as minerals.
Oh, minerals. Okay.
I just had a person and I was trying to help them. I'm thinking all the different things that could have caused their problems and so on from what they shared with me. And I missed it. I feel bad because I knew better. But this person had bad tinnitus and they couldn't get over it. They were just low in magnesium.
Oh.
And the 2 minerals your ears need are zinc and magnesium.
Those 2. Well, it's a kind of thing that I don't think I don't know where you're in Washington State. I'm down in California. That's something that at USC, so University of Southern California, they did a study over in India because they couldn't get one done here. So they did it over in India, but they did it on little children who had hearing loss. And what they found was when they gave them zinc supplements, then it reversed their hearing where they were actually able to hear better. So I know the zinc test is quite expensive in the United States, but it is something that I know with the COVID now, it's also an immunity factor. So it helps with your immune system. And I know I'm taking supplements myself right now I used to just take 1. I'm now taking 2. Because I figured, okay, we're being bombarded by all this, but I know you're supposed to take it with food, otherwise it will eat up the inside of your stomach. And so it's the kind of thing that I just do that because I'm like you, I'm on no medicines. I had a diagnosis last year, actually the previous year, where they wanted to do surgery. And I thought, okay, let me just take a look at this and see what I can find and see. So I adjusted my eating habits and I did just what you said, which I think is phenomenal, where I took some foods that were causing part of the cause. And I have on my refrigerator door to this day, foods to avoid and food to eat. And occasionally, every now and then, I will eat food that I'm supposed to avoid, even red wine, which is ear healthy, by the way. But it's also bad for this other health condition that I have. So the following day, I will feel little aches and pains in my body. So you're like, okay, Teresa, you knew that you weren't supposed to do this, but you did it anyway. So it's just something that I then adjust. But I think that's a phenomenal idea to do that. So do you have any other suggestions for people when they're, the boomers, the baby boomers, we are a $1.7 trillion missed market niche that has hearing loss. So that's how much we're worth. So we didn't used to be considered business sexy, but now we're considered business sexy because we have a lot of money to spend. So many people have saved up on the retirement and they're doing well. So it's something that many of them are, because we're still kind of isolated with the COVID, but it's the kind of thing that people can actually maybe take a look at their So are you available for them to call or for email where they can maybe take a look at the medications they're on and then maybe, give suggestions or maybe have questions that they can ask their own doctor about?
What I do is people email me or phone me all the time, and they say, "Is this drug autotoxic?" Well, if I recognize the name, yes, it is. It's very simple. But what I do is I can tell them, and I use the latest information that I always have on my computer in the 4th edition. So I have right up to the date information as far as I've got it. And I'll tell them what the side effects are. And they ask me, do you think that this drug caused my tinnitus? I've been on it for 20 years, they say. And now in the last 2 months, I've got tinnitus. And I try and see whether they've taken anything else, if the stress level changed, what's going on. And I give them my opinion, which may not be worth anything, but it's still mine.
Yeah.
And so I'll help them that way. Or they will say, my doctor prescribed this drug. Should I take it or no? Well, how do I know? That's your choice.
Right.
But I'll say, if I say, I'm not a medical doctor, I don't prescribe, I don't get into dosages and all the rest of it. You ask your doctor what drug might do the job. Get a list of 3 or 4 drugs the doctor thinks will do the job. I'll tell you, in my opinion, which one I would take. In other words, which is the least autotoxic. But remember, this book, thinking of me, see how thick that is, that's only to do with ears. Right. You've got to worry about eyes and nose and mouth and stomach and heart and lungs and kidneys and everything else. And so you want to take the drug that has the least toxic load of everything. And when you're taking drugs, a former FDA commissioner is on record as saying every drug has side effects. So you trade off. And you always like to think that when a doctor prescribes a drug, that the balance is going to be that it's going to do a lot of good and very few, I got to keep my hands in the picture here, very few side effects. That's what you're expecting. And what so often happens is that the good that the drug does is very dubious and the side effects are bad. And so many people have told me, if I had known that this would be the side effect of the drug, I would never have taken it, because the side effects I've got now are far worse than what I was taking the drug for. Like one guy said, I was taking this antidepressant for tinnitus. And he says, it's so ironic now that the drug has caused my tinnitus to get so much worse than I had before. So he's worse off now for taking a drug. And that's why I say you go easy on the drugs. And if you're depressed, I suggest to people take things like St. John's wort.
Okay.
St. John's wort, I tell people, if you take it, it'll help you as much as antidepressants will. Studies have shown that. And so I say, but what you've always got to be careful with these herbals, there's always side effects there too, if you get them out of balance and so on. And I say for St. John's wort, for example, I happen to know this, the active ingredient is called hypericin. That's Hypericin. And when you buy a herbal, and I looked online, and there's hundreds of different ones you could get. Almost none of them tell the three secret words. You've got to see, if it's not on the label on the bottle, if it doesn't say standardized. And that's what you want to know, because I'm just going to make this a hypothetical case. Say the hypericin is all in the flowers, and somebody makes a herbal concoction and they use St. John's wort, pure organic St. John's wort. I mean, it sounds good, but it's all they do is put the leaves in the capsules. You've got no hypericin, it won't help you. So you want standardized. That's how you know what level it is. Then you want to know what's standardized. And you want to know that it's hypericin, because that's the active ingredient in St. John's wort. And then the third secret word is not a word, it's a number. What is it standardized to? What percentage? And normally it would be 0.3%. So a third of 1%. It could range up to maybe 0.6 or 0.9%, but 0.3% is the standard, most common. So if I tell people, if you want to get St. John's wort, you look and see that it's got standardized hypericin 0.3%. Then you know what you're getting. And if you saw one that was standardized to 0.6%, you know it's twice as strong. So if you were taking 2 of 0.3, or you could take 1 of 0.6, and you just know how to regulate
Just
yourself.
that. Yeah. Well, this has all been very informative. Once again, we're running out of time like we do. So I want to thank you for being on the Pop Sound Advice, a hearing friendly business podcast today. And I will have all your information in show notes. So those people who are listening that might have a hard of hearing issue can have that. And also the deaf are included as well. And I don't know if you've heard, and this is another one of my words that the lady said I could pronounce it however I wanted, but there is a Japanese company, and I'll just spell it for you, but it's Kangen, and it's Kangen water. And it basically, what it does is it also labeled as happy water. So since we're on the topic of St. John's wort, then it basically, what it does is it delivers more oxygen to the cells, because it gets through the membrane inside your cell easier than regular water. And of course, alkaline water now is the big thing. So this is obviously alkaline as well. But it is the kind of thing that anytime you can, like what you heard the doctor say, is that almost all I'm going to say what he said, that medications do have some sort of side effect. So it's important to even contact Dr. Neal, or in some way look at your medication list and question what you're taking, if you're taking medicine, and then weigh out whether they're actually going to be better for you or worse for you. And then it's the kind of thing that the doctors, the MDs, and the naturopaths, and the DOs, and all the other labels, the holistic practitioners, they are evaluating your entire body. And there's a whole lot going on. I mean, what a phenomenal machine our bodies are. I mean, that in my case, it's lasted for quite a few years with very little broken. And I think it's phenomenal. And it's the kind of thing that a lot of cars haven't lasted this long. And so it's the kind of, or I've gone through a lot of cars anyway in my life. And so it's the kind of thing that you think, well, let's take care of it the best way you can. So again, If you'll hold up your book, so those that are seeing this visually, tell us the name and then also how people can reach you.
All right. Yeah, they can get a hold of me if you go to my website, hearinglosshelp.com. It's easy to remember. It's hearing loss and you want help, so it's hearinglosthelp.com. And my name, address, phone number, email address, everything is to the bottom of every page, so that it makes it easy for you to get a hold of me if you have some questions.
Well, I'm going to tell Dr. Neal's telephone number is 360-778-1266. And you can reach him directly by Neil, spelled with Neil, at hearinglosthelp.com. And that will be in show notes. And that book is called The Ototoxic
Drugs Exposed.
Drugs Exposed. And another word for drugs in this case is medication. So ototoxic, which is ear toxic, medications exposed. So you need to know what you're taking.
I use the word drugs because this one covers recreational drugs. It covers everything, and it covers herbals as well, chemicals. So I don't care what you want to call it.
Okay.
It's stuff that wrecks your ears.
So we were going to say goodbye, but let me just ask you this question, and we may go on for a while, but you all now have that information. So in the cannabis industry has gotten quite large. Here in Carlsbad, California, they were actually giving the cannabis industry workers, counting them as essential workers, where they were getting the COVID shot over, say, the grocery worker, which I don't know where the logic came from that, but that's what I read. And so are there any cannabis derivatives or drugs that can actually help with hearing loss?
I'm not sure that that's the case. And of course, we have to be careful to distinguish between the cannabis that gets you high and the one that actually helps your body. And they're still too merged.
Okay.
And people are thinking the wrong way. And so if you get high and you're driving, this is not good. And so I try not to get into it too much, but I have seen that there's good things for the regular kind. But does it help your hearing? I'm not sure, but I can tell you it's in my book that it does damage. It can damage ears. So
so it can damage ears.
Yeah, so I would be careful. And if you want to know, you can always get a hold of me and I can tell you what I know, the latest that I know as of the time.
Okay.
Hopefully I haven't forgotten everything I ever knew.
No, you seem like you have a wonderful sense of humor, and you also seem like you've taken this health issue that a lot of people think of as depressing, and you put a funny spin on a lot of it in a positive way. So it's just been a pleasure to have you on Sound Advice, Hearing Friendly Business Podcast. And until next time, I'll say so long. See you again.
Bye now.